Fierce fighting is taking place in the areas of Pokrovsk, Mirnograd and Gulyaipol. What's happening right now on the hottest sections of the front? All the details are in our report. Trump's plan is on the verge of failure. Zelensky is trying to secure Europe's support for a new peace agreement on Ukraine. Russia is much larger, Ukraine needs elections, and the beautiful Crimea is surrounded by the ocean on all four sides. New escapades from Donald Trump in an interview for Politico. The Kremlin threatens to assemble combat drones together with India and immediately use them to strike Ukraine. Bad news for the Kremlin. Ukraine already has an effective response to this. All this and more coming up right now. And in the meantime, don't forget to like this episode. Ukraine, together with its European partners, has finalized a peace plan to end the war and is ready to send the document to the United States in the near future. This was stated by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. He said that there had been a discussion with Ukraine's negotiating team about the results of their work in London at the level of national security advisors from EU countries. Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine will be ready to send the revised documents to the United States in the very near future. We are interested in real peace and are in constant contact with America. Everything depends on whether Russia is ready to take effective steps to stop the bloodshed and prevent the escalation of the war, the Ukrainian leader reiterated. On the deep state map, Mirnograd is now completely surrounded by what is known as the gray zone. The situation in Pokrovsk also remains extremely difficult. We will tell and show you more details about what is happening on the front line in our military review.
Watch! A nighttime drone raid in Cheboksary. According to Russian reports, the local thermal power plant was damaged. Another piece of good news from the Ukrainian defenders. On December 5th, SBU drones struck a liquefied gas terminal in the Russian port of Temryuk. As a result of the attack, more than 20 out of the 30 available storage tanks burned down. In addition, railway tank cars were destroyed. Life is anything but boring for the residents of Kursk region. People whose homes were destroyed and looted by Putin's army took to the streets in protest after the cancellation of payments that compensated displaced persons for rental housing. Fighters of Free Ichkeria, who are fighting on the side of Ukraine, have challenged Ramzan Kadyrov to a meeting. Whether Kadyrov will come to meet with his fellow citizens is unclear.
Let's absolutely do it. Pick a perfect place. Come on now, let's truly swear on it. Right here, right now.
Meanwhile, as Ramzan searches for his path, the situation on the Russian-Ukrainian war front remains difficult.
The situation in the Pokrovsk and Vinogradiv directions remains truly one of the most difficult on the front. It's obvious that in terms of the intensity of the fighting, this is the hardest area. Our troops were not informed about this for several days. Today, it was possible to straighten the front line, to withdraw from those gray zones that existed in the area, for example, of Suky Yag and Lysivka, because there were corresponding threats there. They managed to preserve the personnel and, as I already mentioned, withdraw them from these dangerous areas and continue today. The defensive operation continues both in the Pokrovsk area and directly in Mirnograd.
The armed forces of Ukraine are holding back the enemy in the Kupiansk and Gulyaipol directions.
All locations are important today, primarily because these are key settlements for our logistics. Including the Gulyaipol direction, this gives the enemy the opportunity to focus on fire strikes, on fire control over our logistics on the Zaporizhzhia front, over at least several locations accordingly. That is why the enemy is currently making such attempts at active combat operations, trying to carry out full-scale offensive actions. However, for now, the defense forces have managed to stop the enemy, have managed, so to speak, to create a new defensive line, using, among other things, the terrain and the enemy's attempts to infiltrate through infiltration. Their attempts to enter the settlement itself are being maximally suppressed today.
In the Lyman direction, the enemy has begun to use heavy armored vehicles. In the Alexandrovsk direction, 2 Ukrainian defenders from the 67th Brigade captured 6 occupiers. Another prisoner from the Dobropoli direction was taken by our fighters from the 82nd Brigade. In the video is Andrei Kudyakov, who signed a contract with the occupying army because of debts, something he now regrets.
I am deeply disappointed in the armed forces of the Russian Federation. What is stated in the contract does not match what is actually written.
Putin plans to replenish the ranks of the occupying army, or more precisely, to cover losses with new blood. That is why he signed a decree for another round of reservist call-ups, which will take place in Russia as early as 2026.
This winter will be extremely difficult. The enemy is destroying Ukraine's energy infrastructure to deprive Ukrainians of electricity and sow a sense of despair. But here's some bad news for the Kremlin cannibals. F-16 fighter jets in service with Ukraine have likely started shooting down Russian Shaheds using inexpensive and effective missiles. Here are all the details.
Every day, Ukraine is under massive attack from Russian UAVs. The drones are launched both at critical infrastructure and at civilian targets. But Ukraine now possesses the most effective and robust way to counter these Russian attacks. F-16 fighter jets have started shooting down Shaheds using APKWS-2 missiles with laser guidance.
They can practically, let's say, operate at the moment of so-called swarm deployment. That is, one aircraft illuminates the target and the strike is delivered. Laser target designation, and accordingly, the second aircraft can engage the target. This is quite remarkable, especially considering that the Russians have started using the principle of swarm drone launches, meaning several dozen at once and in multiple waves.
Previously, the effectiveness of missiles against drones had already been proven in Ukraine, but when launched from ground-based systems. Now, however, the system works in the air as well.
Moreover, the Russians note their high effectiveness. This concerns not only the destruction of Geran 2 and Geran 3 drones with jet engines, but primarily reconnaissance drones. This was the main threat to the Ukrainian defense forces. Reconnaissance drones operated outside the range of air defense systems, flying at altitudes from 5,000 meters, and thus posed a serious problem for the Ukrainian side.
The main advantage of these missiles is their price. Previously, to shoot down a single drone, they used missiles costing $1 million. Now, the effectiveness is the same, but the price is several times lower.
Let me remind you that the missile for the short and medium range surface-to-air missile system costs about $100,000. Missiles for the Patriot air defense systems cost about $1.5 million. These particular missiles, specifically their remarkable ability to be effectively used primarily against various types of attack drones and reconnaissance drones, that's indeed the main and most crucial point. The significant advantage is that it comprehensively allows you to substantially reduce operational costs while simultaneously maintaining a highly effective and robust air defense system.
Previously, it was believed that Ukrainian F-16s would receive such weapons. But that won't happen anytime soon. But suddenly, one of the partners provided Ukraine with special equipment that allows the use of such missiles.
This is an American development accordingly, either the American side or European partners, but most likely a decision by the American side. The very fact of transferring these strike assets already scientifically disproves it. The fact that the American side has suspended the expanded nature of military technical assistance to Ukraine. In other words, this is an element of military political pressure on the Russian side. And note that the transfer of American strike assets coincides with the intensification of the negotiation process.
The main question is whether this will change the situation in the skies, since drones remain one of Russia's main tools of pressure. They are launched in series, in waves, trying to overload air defenses.
Not a single air defense system provides a 100% guarantee. Yes, this will significantly strengthen the Ukrainian side's position in terms of defense. First and foremost, the key energy and logistics facilities. But to say that this is an absolute panacea, no, that does not reflect reality. It is just one component of the air defense system.
The new equipment has significantly strengthened Ukraine's air forces. Now it is possible to shoot down enemy drones more effectively without spending expensive missiles on it. And this is especially important now, when Shaheds threaten the Ukrainian skies every day.
Russia supposedly has an advantage in negotiations about the war in Ukraine right now, since it is a much larger country. Ukraine, despite the war, must hold elections. This was stated by US President Donald Trump in an interview with Politico. Trump also expressed the opinion that elections should be held in Ukraine. He criticized the fact that they were postponed until the end of the war, implying an alleged lack of democracy. In addition, the American leader stated that Ukraine will not join NATO. According to him, this understanding existed as far back as the 19th century, long before Putin. And of course, how could we go without a lesson? Geography? Trumps? In the interview, he spoke about the beautiful Crimea, which, attention, is surrounded on all four sides by the ocean. Now, I know Ukraine very well. I know it very well, Trump added. Well, as they say, who would have doubted it? The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is seeking support for a counter-proposal that will be presented to the American leader, Donald Trump. This was reported by The Telegraph. Zelensky is trying to secure Europe's support for a new peace agreement on Ukraine, while Trump's plan is on the verge of failure, the publication notes. The day before, the president of Ukraine met with Pope Leo XIV and later with the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. Western partners are also constantly pressuring Trump on the issue of peace talks, defending the position of official Kyiv. Meanwhile, things are going extremely badly for Russia in Savannah, as sanctions are finally crippling the Russian economy.
Europe continues to fight for Ukraine. Today in Brussels, a decision is being made that just a year ago seemed impossible. The European Union has found a legal loophole that allows it to block Russian assets without the unanimous consent of all member states.
The published text is a complex legal document that tries to resolve two contradictions: to provide money to Ukraine without direct costs for member states, and to make decisions without the unanimity that is currently required. The result? It's complicated, but it might work. According to...
Essentially, the EU countries are getting themselves out of a trap they set for themselves at the very start of the full-scale war.
All these years, the fate of the frozen Russian assets depended on the mood of one or two countries that could block any decision. Now, however, Brussels is using a mechanism designed for cases of economic shocks. And Russia's war against Ukraine has been officially recognized as just such a shock. Meanwhile, in European capitals, they are already preparing a move that could become the biggest financial blow to the Russian Federation. During the entire rule of the bunker dweller, the European Commission has proposed allocating 210 billion euros in support for Ukraine until 2027. And a significant portion of these funds is supposed to come specifically from the frozen Russian assets. 185 billion are held in the Belgian depository Euroclear, with another approximately 25 billion in accounts in other EU countries.
Germany will provide 25% of the support, which is the largest share among all countries.
This is especially important now, as Belgium, the country where Euroclear is located, has in recent months been slowing down the process, fearing legal consequences and impacts on its own financial system.
Belgium is more concerned than anyone else that Russia might later try to reclaim these assets through the courts, and in that case, Belgium would need the support of other countries. And that's why all the European countries that support Merz's idea are also trying to persuade Belgium. I think that in the end, they will succeed.
While the fate of Russian assets is being decided in Brussels, European leaders are fighting on another diplomatic front. And the key figures in this remain the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It is they, together with the Ukrainian government, who continue to defend Kyiv's interests before the United States.
We all support Ukraine, and we all stand in support. Peace and peace negotiations in order to achieve a sustainable, lasting peace. And I believe that much now lies in our hands. Funding, the quality of equipment and training for the Ukrainian army, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, as well as the fact that the Russian economy is beginning to suffer, especially after our latest sanctions and those of the United States. And now, as it seems to me, the main issue is bringing our positions closer together, those of Europeans, Ukrainians, and the United States, in order to conclude these peace negotiations and once again strengthen trust under the best possible conditions for Ukraine, for Europeans, and for our collective security.
But let's return to the sanctions and their consequences for Russia. Analysts from The Insider have found that the sanctions are literally tearing apart the production chains of Russian weaponry. The country is unable to fully carry out complex chemical processing. Access to the necessary reagents is closed off. The import of strategic chemicals has plummeted. This is especially difficult. All of this has hit the production of rocket fuel, a critical sector without which modern weaponry is impossible.
Apparently, since the start of the full-scale war, there has been a recorded decline in weapons production in Russia in the month of September. Now, the problems that were discussed 6 months ago are already hitting Russia's military-industrial complex.
But the effect of the sanctions could be even stronger. For example, the main intelligence directorate is calling for restrictions on the entire production chain. Because right now, 13 out of 49 Russian companies involved in the creation of missiles like the Iskander-M are still not under sanctions.
The Kremlin is threatening to assemble combat drones together with India and immediately use them to strike Ukraine. In exchange for cooperation with the bunker dweller, Moscow is offering a generous bonus, the transfer of technology and combat experience. A delegation from the Smolensk FPV drone piloting center even flew to India with Putin to set up production. For more details on the prospects of cooperation between the Kremlin and New Delhi, watch our report.
Good afternoon.
The Russian Federation is becoming increasingly dependent on India. Modi and Putin have decided to go into business together.
I know that in India they say we will go together, we will grow together.
Russia is actively expanding cooperation and seeking to establish joint production of drones. This is stated in a new report by the American Institute for the Study of War.
The Kremlin is considering expanding joint weapons production in India. This concerns drones that Russia will very likely use on the battlefield in Ukraine, possibly in exchange for Russian technological innovations and lessons learned in Ukraine.
This was also confirmed by Sergei Chemezov, head of the Russian state corporation Rostec.
We made our proposals and sent them over. Regarding the Su-57, Russia is ready to offer localization of production. They said, "We'll think about it."
Moscow is negotiating with Delhi about localizing the production of Russian drones, including strike Lancets on Indian territory.
Guys, let's just not talk about this matter.
The day before, in an interview with India Today, Putin emphasized that Russia is closely cooperating with India. It not only supplies weapons to the east, but also transfers technologies for the shipbuilding, missile, and aviation industries. And how did you raise people? According to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, such statements indicate the Kremlin's intentions to deepen military technical cooperation with India, possibly up to the joint production of strike drones. Thanks to its ally, the Kremlin is likely counting on using these drones in the war against Ukraine in exchange for transferring them to India. New technologies and combat experience.
And I want it to be absolutely clear, the Russian delegation came to this important meeting not only to discuss pressing energy issues, but also not only to place orders and sign contracts for the supply of oil or gas. We want to develop multifaceted relations with India.
The visit of the Smolensk FPV drone piloting center delegation to India put all the dots on the I's. It was announced as fulfilling tasks within the framework of the Russian-Indian strategic partnership.
We greatly value India's position on many issues. India is the only country with which, by the way, we have never been at war and with which we have no mutual claims. And we are truly grateful to the esteemed Indian side for always consistently and promptly responding to our numerous invitations, diligently coming to our joint exercises, and graciously inviting us in return for collaborative engagements and mutual benefit.
At the same time, Russia is trying to attract as much Indian labor to the country as possible. Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov stated that Moscow is ready to accept an unlimited number of migrants from India. As it turned out, because Putin sent a significant portion of the population to war, now Russian industry is short 1.5 million people in trade, construction, and the service sector. Manufacturing
industry needs to reach the bare minimum of existing levels. 1,000 people. And as for example, trade, I'm writing, there are about 500,000 required in trade, the service sector, and construction. I think we have some relatively strong areas. There are definitely jobs available.
In addition, the Kremlin appointed head of the Occupation Administration of Kherson Region, Saldo, stated that he too discussed opportunities for cooperation with Indian representatives.
Businessmen from India, Iran, Nicaragua, and France have shown interest. This is a sign of trust in our land, in its future, and in the determination of the people to build a new, prosperous Kherson region.
Cooperation with Russia is already causing India significant economic losses. Due to purchases of Russian oil and weapons, the US in 2025 raised tariffs on most Indian goods to 50%, including additional tariffs related to energy trade. This hit Indian manufacturers focused on the American market. And after the latest meeting between Modi and Putin, the Indian rupee fell to a record low.
They say that in the past, a yogi could go a whole year without putting anything in his mouth. But now they're breaking records. Everyone eats.
India is wary of sanctions, so it intends to reduce imports of Russian oil to the lowest level in 3 years. The largest Indian energy company has already completely stopped purchases, switching to raw materials from Middle Eastern countries and the US.
This is an important event because we have known each other for 25 years.
The media reported that during Putin's visit to Delhi, he planned to discuss the purchase of Russian fighter jets and air defense systems. India has also agreed to lease a Russian nuclear attack submarine for 10 years at a cost of $2 billion.
Ukraine's ambassador to London and former commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhnyi, has returned to Ukraine and published an article titled Politics and War: Reality versus Expectations, which he had conceived even before stepping down as commander-in-chief. In this article, he attempted to formulate Ukraine's military strategy for the coming year. What is behind Zaluzhnyi's unexpected return, and what does the publication of the former commander-in-chief's article mean? We'll tell you more in our report, but for now, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today.
The former commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and now ambassador to the United Kingdom, Valery Zaluzhnyi, has apparently returned to Ukraine. He hinted at this on his Facebook page. The former commander-in-chief posted a joint photo with his wife Olena with the concise caption, "Home is best." And soon after, an article authored by Zaluzhnyi appeared on the Liga.net website about Ukraine's likely military strategy for the coming year. And now some people have started saying that this is a direct step toward a political career.
In this comprehensive and insightful article, General Valery Zaluzhnyi, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, presents his strategic perspectives and critical analysis on the ongoing military situation, offering a detailed examination of the challenges and potential future developments.
Noted that by the end of 2023, the nature of the war had completely changed. Unlike Zaluzhnyi's previous texts, which were devoted exclusively to military issues, the new one also touches on the topic of politics. In Zaluzhnyi's opinion, for Ukraine to successfully continue the war, a military strategy alone is not enough. They need a clear political goal, which will make it possible not only to see what the enemy is doing, but also how to move forward themselves. What is the outcome of the war? What will Ukraine consider a victory? Zaluzhnyi notes that, to this day, no one knows the answer to this.
Ukraine must be preserved. Our children, our women, our parents must live in peace no matter what it costs us.
But Russia, on the other hand, has a goal, an absolutely clear one. Its vision of victory is the elimination of Ukraine as an independent state. The former commander-in-chief also writes that relying solely on the supply of weapons from partners is an unreliable plan. It's an unreliable plan.
And not even because sooner or later they will run out of such weapons, but primarily because the weapons themselves will eventually change and they will no longer be available from our partners.
Zaluzhnyi not only criticizes the Ukrainian government, but also proposes the same kind of political goal for the country. In his opinion, victory for Ukraine should be the collapse of the Russian Empire, which poses an existential threat to Ukraine as an independent state. And he suggested that defeat should be considered the complete occupation of Ukraine as a result of its own collapse, because everything else is simply a continuation of the war.
Undoubtedly, when it comes to the military, that is, forceful support, there is a sense that it is present. As for Valery Zaluzhnyi,
he insists that true security for Ukraine can only be ensured by joining NATO, deploying nuclear weapons, or having an allied military contingent stationed in the country. But Zaluzhnyi admits that these wishes are unrealistic, which means the war will continue in one form or another. This raises the question of whether Zaluzhnyi is planning a political career, since this is being discussed more and more often. For example, this was commented on by diplomat and former Ukrainian ambassador to Belarus, Roman Besmertny.
The first and most important thing I want to note is that extraordinary and plenipotentiary Ambassador Valery Zaluzhnyi has already gone beyond the scope of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff. In the current situation, I would insist that the new coalition should propose a government. And in fact, his approaches are sufficient for him to lead this government, given his understanding of its genesis and development. This resource shouldn't be wasted on him just sitting in London and continuing to write articles.
Moreover, in regular public opinion polls about potential presidential candidates, Zaluzhnyi always holds leading positions.
Undoubtedly, Valery Fedorovich possesses a very positive public image, but despite this, he still significantly lacks extensive experience in effectively managing the complex civilian, non-military sphere of operations and administration. And this could create difficulties, but at this particular stage, I am not entirely ready to definitively claim that this specific model of political power transition from President Zelensky, let's consciously not name him just yet, as it's premature to do so, is something we can confidently discuss. To President Zaluzhnyi is being considered as the main scenario, though it is seen as one of the more than possible options.
But while Ukraine was discussing Zaluzhny's possible future, he had already returned to London. And there he greeted President Zelensky at the airplane ramp.
Zelensky understands them as well. And naturally, he will try, let's say, to maintain a good relationship with Zaluzhny, perhaps even make him an offer, yes, to integrate him into the system of power where President Zelensky is the head.
It all comes down to one thing, experts note. Even if Zaluzhny does have political ambitions, it's too early to talk about that for now. After all, at this point, it's all just speculation.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.